What's up, duelists? The metagame has changed a ton since I have done this video last. This is the sideboard tier list video, and since the metagame has changed a ton, the sideboarding patterns have changed a ton, and I feel like I want to bring you guys some updated strategies, some updated opinions on what are the best cards to be sideboarding right now against the most popular decks in Edison format. Of course, if you guys want to try this out, or if you have like special theories on this yourself and you want to compete at the highest level for Edison format, RBET, really big Edison tournament, is coming up. There's one this upcoming weekend online in the really big Yu-Gi-Oh Discord. You can join that in the description below. And then there are 3 IRL tournaments coming up with massive pricing, like the best pricing for any Yu-Gi-Oh events, like all year, no cap. It's going to be amazing. Check out the signups for those if they're in a city near you, or if you feel like you want to travel with some friends and come play. RBT Los Angeles, Laurel, Maryland, and New York are going to be the biggest Edison events all year, basically. And also, they are selling out fast, so you want to get signed up early, because like last year for RBET Orlando, I had a bunch of people hit me up and be like, yo, Keegan, can I get into this tournament? And I'm like, dude, it sold out like 3 weeks ago. And they were like, but I already bought my flight. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you. We can't fit any more people in the venue. I'm telling you, these events are packed, so definitely get signed up as soon as possible. All right, let's get into this. So the number one most popular deck right now, it just won the Ultimate Time Wizard last weekend, is Vayu Turbo. So we're going to be like referring to that a lot. Generally speaking, whatever the most popular deck is in Edison format at any given week, whether it's Black Wings or Plants or Vayu Turbo or Frogs or Heroes or whatever, it kind of dictates what you should and shouldn't be sideboarding in just about everything. And there are certain cards that are really good against, Vayu Turbo that aren't super good against other things, but this tier list, maybe you're watching this 6 months in the future and the most popular deck is like Dragons or something crazy, like, you know what I mean? But the point is that right now, for this moment in time, these are the most popular decks. It's like Vayu Turbo, then Frogs, then Black Wings, then Zombies, then Heroes, then Plants, then Lightsworn. So those are like kind of like in that order, the most popular decks, and that's how I'm going to be shaping this around that. But yeah, that's definitely subject to change in the future. So if you're watching this maybe like 6-8 months down the future, pay more attention to the metagame, I guess, and just be like, oh, people aren't playing this deck so much anymore, so we should be siding stuff differently. Let's just get right into things. Okay, the first card I want to talk about in today's tier list video is Dust Tornado. This is kind of a catch-all Edison format card, and it's really, really good. I think it's an auto-include sideboard card. I think most, if not all, decks should be sideboarding Dust Tornado. I think it's just really, really strong up against specifically that deck I was talking about, the number one most played deck right now, which is Vayu Turbo, because the way that deck works is they like to set Raikou and they like to set back row. And then when they do that, you can set Dust Tornado. A little bit of spoilers. You can set Dust Tornado, right? And then on their turn, they're going to flip Raikou and they're going to target your back row, because Raikou always hits back row. I mean, it's just the way Raikou goes. Raikou's never hitting monsters, right? Because they don't want to accidentally hit a Sangan or a Goblin Zombie or something like that. So Raikou's always hitting your back row, and then you can chain the Dust Tornado and hit their back row. So it's like you get a +1 in a way, because you kill their Raikou, sorta, and then you also kill their back row with the Dust Tornado. So I think it's an auto-include because of how it matches up against that turn 1 Raikou set going second. So I think it's an auto-include just for that reason alone. But then again, also, like, most decks, right? Most decks, there are some pretty hateful floodgates in Edison format. Pardon me. There's some pretty hateful floodgates in Edison format, and Dust Tornado does a good job at just like making sure you're not getting flooded out. I think having that extra spot removal is pretty important. So if you're building a sideboard, I would definitely start with like Dust Tornado. Another card I would start with is DD Crow, and I would actually rank this card even higher than Dust Tornado. So we're gonna reorder that just a little bit. I think DD Crow is the number one sideboard card in Edison format right now. I think is just the best sideboard card you can have. Once again, reflecting on those decks in order, the number one most popular deck is Vayu Turbo. That deck is very graveyard focused, and if you can shut off their powerful graveyard synergies, then you're absolutely going to be at an advantage. And DD Crow is a very difficult card to interact with in Edison format. The only way that Vayu Turbo can really interact with DD Crow is Deck Devastation Virus, which is very difficult for them to get live if you have a DD Crow. Also Trap Dust Shoot, but that's like a one of, and we're not really going to get into that right now. But basically, like, the way they make their deck dev live is they'll use Dark Refer or Armageddon Knight or like even Raikou, and they'll mill some Vayu, mill some Sirocco, and then they'll try to activate the Vayu to summon an Armed Wing to use for their deck dev, and then you can chain the DD Crow, and it oftentimes can shut off the powerful Vayu play and the deck devastation as well. So it's a really strong card in that matchup in specific. Generally speaking, it's a good card. It's good against Frogs, which is the next most played deck. If they go like turn 1, summon Swap Frog, send Treeborn, they're behind a turn because they have spent their whole turn just summoning a Swap Frog and sending a Treeborn. So they've used up their entire normal summon for that turn. And then if you have a DD Crow, basically it's like a time walk. You DD Crow their Treeborn Frog on their standby phase, and then they have to spend that next turn summoning Swap Frog again and sending Treeborn again. So just one DD Crow against a very common opening from Frogs buys you 2 whole turns. So it's really good card against the top 2 decks. If you have multiple Crows, you can banish both Treeborns and then just shut them off with that advantage engine entirely. This is a really strong card. I'd be citing like 2 to 3 in just about anything I play right now. I think it's just fantastic card. Really, really powerful. Great against the top decks. A little bit weak on its own. And it's not the best against Blackwings, but Blackwings has really waned in popularity. The last 2 major tournaments, there were 0 Blackwing decks in top 8, which is, a lot of people last year were saying like, oh, Blackwings is the best deck, you know what I mean? Like, and as you can see, like, Edison is a very cyclical format. Next month, maybe even 2 months from now, DD Crow won't be the best card because maybe Blackwings will be back into popular. But, you get the idea. It's really good against the decks that are popular right now, and that's kind of the vibe. All right, next card I want to talk about is Electric Virus. Electric Virus is a very niche card. It can steal dragons, and it can steal machines. I'm going to put this in niche for bad matchups. Usually, the best application for Electric Virus is you take the Kawakimeru Drago, and then you attack for 19, and they can't Gorz you because there's a Drago in play. And then end phase, you choose not to reveal a dragon, and it destroys the Drago. That's the best use case for this card. It's not super good against the most prominent machine deck right now because it does target. And the most prominent machine deck right now is just Machina, and the machine monster that they leave in play is Machina Fortress. So pitching it to steal a fortress will get you hand ripped, and that's not ideal, and there's usually very little you can do with a Machina Fortress after getting hand ripped. Like, it's very rare that you'll have an Electric Virus and 2 tribute monsters in your hand, for example, to be able to convert that Machina Fortress. So I would say it's niche for bad matchup, borderline outclassed, but I would say if you struggle with dragons specifically and having extra brain controls versus dragons is what you need, then I would say niche for bad matchup for Electric Virus. All right, next card we're getting into, Consecrated Light. So this is going to go into the second tier here, play if you can. This card is fantastic versus the decks it's good against. It's great against Blackwings, obviously. That deck is mostly dark, if not entirely dark. It's pretty good against some of the other, like, Teledad style, like instant zombie synchro style decks. It's pretty good there. And it's also pretty good versus Vayu Turbo. Now you have to keep in mind, Vayu Turbo does play Card Trooper, it does play Hamster, and it does play Raikou, so it does have at least 6 monsters, 5-6 monsters it can attack over Consecrated Light with. But that being said, if you can stop the Raikou or if you can stop the Card Trooper, like, that's all you need to stop before you win the entire game with Consecrated Light. So if you have that game plan in mind, like, okay, I'm going to beat the Raikou this way, then I'm going to stick a Consecrated Light, then I win. And that's something that definitely should be considered. Unlike Blackwings, Vayu Turbo very rarely plays Icarus Attack, and so it very rarely plays cards that can get rid of a Consecrated Light very easily. And on top of that, they've actually been cutting Book of Moon as well, so it makes it even harder for them to out this little guy. So he's actually really good against the most popular deck if you have a plan to deal with like that Card Trooper, Raikou, Hamster thing. If you just are throwing in Consecrated Light and just hoping to summon it turn 1 and auto win, it's not that good. It's not that simple. But it is very good against the top deck. And it's also very good against some of the other decks as well. Now, that being said, this card cannot be played if you're playing a dark deck, because obviously it shuts out both players. So it's a little bit restrictive, and that's why I'm putting it in the play if you can. If your deck can support Consecrated Light, if you can A, have a plan for those Raikos, Hamsters, and Card Trooper, and then B, also you don't play too many Dark Monsters that conflicts with Consecrated Light, then I would say consider this card heavily. I think it's very, very strong. It's had a lot of tournament success. All right, moving on. This one's going to be a little bit of a big change from the last tier list, and that's going to be Cyber Dragon. Now, Cyber Dragon used to be an auto-include card for us in basically any deck. You know, to just slap two Cyber Dragons. Sorry, it's semi-limited. Slap 2 Cyber Dragons in anything. But, you know, as the format's developed, the card's gotten a little bit less favorable. I would say it's honestly niche for bad matchups. It's obviously insane versus machines, right? Because you can just contact into the Chimera Tech Fortress Dragon and get that for free, which is amazing. But it's not the best against Frogs, which is the second most popular deck. It's okay versus Value Turbo, but still not great. They do play that powerful Royal Oppression card, and so they can usually out Cyber Dragon at +1 if they have Royal Oppression early, which is not ideal. It can be okay versus Value Turbo, but Armed Wing, also, their premier summon, is going to be able to attack over the Cyber Dragon. They have a lot of ways of just like dealing with it at +1. So it's not like the best card in that matchup. And again, it's just not very good versus Frogs. So against the 2 most popular decks, you're rarely citing it in. Now, if you have some other cards, it might be part of your plan. Like, let's say you're playing a light deck and you have Honest's, it might be part of your plan. So it might be somewhere in between play if you can and niche for bad matchup. But I'm going to put it in niche for bad matchup. I'm going to put it at the top of niche for bad matchup as of right now, because I think we're moving away from like the sacred cow that is Cyber Dragon. I think that Cyber Dragon is a really strong card, and it has a lot of applications in some bad matchups like Glads and Machines. Like, it's insane against those 2 decks, but it's just not super fantastic versus the top decks right now, and that's totally fine. So yeah, moving on. Cyber Dragon, solid card. Can't really you can go wrong with it because it's just not great into Royal Oppression. I think that's the biggest thing for me personally. All right, moving on. Deck Devastation Virus. I hate this card personally, but it's insane. If you can support it, you absolutely should play it. Play it if you can. It's really broken. It invalidates a lot of strategies, or at least it forces them to play certain ways in post-board games. Like, Deck Dev versus like your standard Jeff Jones style quick draw is going to be just a shutout card. Deck Dev versus some fairy decks can be a shutout card. It's a pretty insane card versus the most popular deck right now, which is Value Turbo. It's really good versus that. It's even solid versus Black Wings Frogs. Like, it has applications in those matchups. So definitely, if you can support this card, you should be playing it. I think it's one of the most powerful cards in the format. I don't think it's main deck worthy because it's like pretty bad in some matchups and some situations. But based off of your opponent's deck configuration and based off of like your game plans and stuff, you could argue siding upwards of 3 of this card if your deck can support it. So definitely broken card. Consider it highly. Moving on. Not much to say about that, honestly. Next card, Compulsory Evacuation Device. I think this card is insane. I think it is really, really, really strong. I would actually almost rate it higher than Dust Tornado. Not quite, of course, but really, really close to that like top 3 sideboard card. You really can't go wrong with it. I think Compulsory Evacuation Device is very good versus Value Turbo. I think it is very good versus Frogs. I think it's also very good versus a lot of the decks that are popular as well. Like, it's decent versus Black Wings. It's decent versus Heroes. It has a lot of applications versus the different hero decks. Like, let's say you're playing versus Diva Hero, which is like a malicious Synchro Absolute Zero deck. Well, Compulsory, 1-for-1 out Stardust or Absolute Zero, like, that's really good. But let's say you're playing against the more Gemini Spark, like hero deck. Your opponent tries to Gemini Spark your monster. If you chain Compulsory, bounce your guy, the Gemini Spark no longer destroys the monster, and they don't get to draw a card, so you get a nice 2-for-1. Like, it has so many applications in so many situations versus the hero decks as well. And it's also fantastic versus Zombies, which is like the next most played deck. So I would say this is the only reason I'm going to rank it like this high or in this tier is because if you aren't already main decking compulsory, then it's really good. The only deck it's like not super great against is like Lightsworn. It's pretty bad versus Lightsworn. It's pretty bad versus the fairy decks. I would say it's not a great card there, but even if your deck is like fast and aggressive, maybe having compulsory on the turn where you can just bounce a Christia and then go for an OTK, like maybe that's just what you need. So very strong utility card, borderline main deck worthy. We might need to add like an extra tier where it's like main deck worthy, but I think you could make an argument for anything in auto include to be main decked. That's kind of like my grounds here. Is like you could make an argument to auto include some of the, or not auto include, to main deck some of the auto include cards. And then I think the play if you can is going to be like maybe a little bit less powerful, I guess, or more narrow. All right, moving on. Compulsory, fucking crazy card. Definitely play it. Definitely play it. I don't think there's a single deck that doesn't want it right now. It's a very, very strong card. All right, next card. Hanawata. This is actually an interesting card. I think it's niche. I think it's actually niche for bad matchup. It's not outclassed. I believe it's a... Let me look this up real quick just to make sure I'm not just completely speaking out of my ass. I know it's a fairy. So if you're playing fairies, it's like at least a Herald pitch or just like a fairy mill for Christia. But let me look this up because I want to say it's a tuner. Yeah, it is a tuner. Yeah, so it's also a tuner. So like worst case scenario, you've got a tuner that's like a 1-star fairy like that you can pitch to Herald of Orange Light. And then let's say you do get paired against Chain Burn, right? Which is rising in popularity. It's not as popular as some of the more popular decks, but it's definitely on the rise. Like in the last RBET, we had more Chain Burn decks than ever before because Chain Burn is a very good deck versus Vayu Turbo and versus Frogs, which are the two most popular decks. So Chain Burn, as a result to this meta, you know, maybe you do want a Hanawata. Maybe your like deck is really solid and you have like a 14th, 15th side deck slot and you're like, I just really want to have that extra card for Chain Burn. The biggest issue with Hanawata, though, is it's possibly outclassed by this next card here, which is Trap Stun. And I'm going to go as far as to put Trap Stun as an auto-include card. I think it's really, really, really good. I think it's fantastic versus not only the Vayu Turbo decks, but also the Frog decks, like weirdly enough. Frog decks have been playing a ton more trap cards lately, and the trap cards they've been playing are things like Phoenix Wing Windblast, like -1 trap cards that they're hoping to pick up based off of the power of that effect. And Trap Stun being able to go +1 on those cards is insane. Trap Stun is phenomenal versus Black Wings, the third most popular deck. It's decent versus Heroes. It just has applications everywhere. It's able to shut off Royal Oppression for that one turn. It's able to, you know, chain to an Icarus attack, get you a +1 and a huge board advantage. It's able to make sure you can resolve your Haymakers. Borderline main deckable. Definitely a solid auto-include. And since this card is so fantastic versus Chain Burn, which is, again, rising in popularity, I think Hanawata might end up being outclassed. But I still think Hanawata has some niche applications in certain decks where it's like, it is a fairy, and like maybe you don't want to set that Trap Stun on turn 1 because like you're playing Frogs or something like that. Hanawata has some applications in those matchups. It's just very niche, and it's only if you like really want to beat Burn or like some sort of like effect damage situation. But worth mentioning, I think worth mentioning for sure. Let's get into the next card, Snowman Eater. Snowman Eater is fantastic, but I don't think it's an auto-include card. I think it's a play if you can card. And play if you can is a little bit, I don't know how to say it, but it's not like any deck really is going to struggle to support Snowman Eater the same way it would struggle to support something like Consecrated Light or Deck Dev. But once you get that flip pop with Snowman Eater, the body itself is kind of pointless unless you have a way to convert it, either like some sort of synchro play or some sort of Caius or some sort of Miracle Fusion, something to do with the Snowman body. And on top of that, I think Snowman Eater is a little bit worse in the metagame right now because those hero decks and those Blackwing decks are kind of on the decline. I mean, like, a lot less hero beat and a lot less Blackwings than we were seeing like even 3 months ago. So that's the matchup that Snowman Eater is really for. I think if you still struggle with those matchups, then and you have a solid conversion for Snowman Eater, then absolutely play it. Play it if you can. But I mean, it's not always the best choice, especially in a metagame where like, Frogs and Vayu Turbo are the most popular decks, and Snowman Eater is arguably a mulligan versus both those decks. So, yeah, I definitely say think about it. If you're struggling with those aggro decks and you already have a fine Vayu Turbo or Frog matchup, then definitely consider Snowman Eater because it's a solid card, especially if your deck has a way to convert it. But if your deck has no way to convert it and like, you have better options or something like that, I think Snowman Eater is fine. It's just a fine sideboard card. All right, moving on. Right now, not its best. It's had better moments. I'll say that. Super polymerization. This is the next one I want to talk about. This one wasn't even on the last tier list, but I'm gonna say it is niche for bad matchup, but possibly just outclassed. I think it's fine. Obviously, like in the Frog Hero Mirror, it's pretty solid. But there are other cards you can play, like Puppet Plant, which are just more direct. They're more aggressive, and they're more, let's just say they're a better way of dealing with Absolute Zero than Super Polymerization. Because you Super Poly away in Absolute Zero, you have to pitch a card from your hand. So even if you're taking both materials from your opponent's field, it's a 2-for-2, which is fine. Like, don't get me wrong, but you have to use one of your Absolute Zeros from your extra deck. It'll get blown up by their Absolute Zero's effect. I don't know. It's not great. I would say it's outclassed by Puppet Plant, which hopefully is in this tier list. It is. Puppet Plant. Now, I actually feel a lot more strongly about playing Puppet Plant than I do about playing Electric Virus. And the biggest reason is because spellcasters and warriors are just more common types than machines and dragons, which may sound weird because a lot of decks play, like Synchro Dragons, and a lot of decks play Card Trooper, but when you're siding in a card, you really want it to be super good against that matchup. And against the decks that are putting warriors into play, aka heroes, Puppet Plant is fucking insane. It's like probably the single best card versus heroes, I would say. It's also pretty solid versus Lightsworn, where you can take their Lumina, their Gareth, their Lila, their Jane, their Aaron, like a lot of the monsters that they leave in play to end phase mill and that shit, you just take it with Puppet Plant. And all of a sudden you've shut off their Honest, you can combo with their card, you can sack it for your Vanity's Fiend, you can synchro with it, you can attack them with it. You could do a bunch of different stuff. You could even just take it and get mills yourself if you need to get your own engine going. So I think Puppet Plant is really good in the matchups where it's good. Whereas I think Electric Virus, even versus Machina, like you're never happy to Electric Virus and Machina Fortress. But I am always happy to Puppet Plant in Absolute Zero. Give me that bitch. I do not want to get Regeki'd. You know what I'm saying? So Puppet Plant, phenomenal card. Very, very strong. I would say play it if you can, if you have the space, or if you're like struggling with heroes. Or if you can support it with stuff like Pot of Avarice or hand rip cards like Spirit Reaper, Airbellum. I think Puppet Plant like really lines up nicely with those cards. So definitely play that boy. Especially if your deck can convert off it. Kind of like Snowman Eater. If you can convert off of that hero you're taking, either with a big OTK or with like a synchro play or something like that, Puppet Plant, definitely worth considering. All right, next card. Soul Release. Soul Release is a really, really good card. I think it's up there right now with DD Crow because, man, I really need like an in-between tier. I need like a 1.5, tier 1.5, right? But I think I'm going to put it in auto-include. Maybe not. Yeah, fuck it. I'm going to put it in auto-include. It's had a lot of good results lately. I think most of the decks at the last RBET were citing Soul Release. It's good versus Vayu Turbo. It's good versus Frogs. It's good versus a bunch of other decks. It's not the best versus stuff like zombies or decks that are like putting the monsters into the grave the turn they're comboing, but it's like solid versus the plant decks that are now rising in popularity. The Amaryllis deck that just got second place at Ultimate Time Wizard last weekend. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in auto-include. I actually think it's a fantastic card right now. The Graveyard synergies have gotten way pushed in this current metagame. Every deck right now that's in the top tier heavily relies on its Graveyard. Or not top tier, but like top tier of most played right now. That's the worst way. Every deck that's being played in large quantities right now is abusing its graveyard. And Soul Release and DD Crow just really shine. I'm actually going to go ahead and reorder this a little bit. We're just going to go ahead and move Trap Stun down. I'm going to move Soul Release up because I actually think Soul Release is better than Trap Stun as a sideboard option right now. And I would go as far to say as it's an auto include. Play one. You won't be disappointed. The card is just great. All right, next card. Mind Crush. Mind Crush. Now, Mind Crush for me, I used to rate it very highly because like of, you know, the feeling you get when you soul read someone. But I'm actually going to put it in niche for bad matchups because decks have gotten so good at like not getting owned by this card. That and just like against the combo deck, like let's say you're playing against Dragon Turbo, which is really what the matchup for this card is. It's not even the best card versus that deck. I would actually go as far as to say fine but outclassed on Mind Crush. Because like there are just better cards for combo decks than Mind Crush. Like if you want to hate out specifically like Dragon Turbo, for example, like Thunder King is going to go a lot further. Obviously, you'd like to have Mind Crush too, like alongside it, but there are just cards that are going to go a lot further than Mind Crush in those matchups. Usually just hand ripping someone for one is not game winning. It feels good. Hand ripping someone always feels broken because it is, but it's not like on the same level as like deck dev by far. I'm going to keep it in niche for bad matchup. I'm going to rate it higher than Electric Virus, but I don't think it's like as auto include as I used to think it was maybe like a couple years ago. And that's largely in part to do with the fact that like I don't know, even against the decks that it's good against, it's still not insane. That being said, if your opponent's playing Gold Sark, it's good there. If your opponent's playing like search cards like E-Call, it's fine. It's a fine inclusion. It's not great going second because they'll just play their search cards first and then summon the card they searched. But, you know, it's fine. It's an okay card. It's chainable, which is pretty cool. A little bit of upside there. But missing with it, obviously, is an instant loss. So, yeah, not the best. Not the best. All right, moving on. Next card I want to talk about is Jowgen the Spiritualist. I actually rated this on the last one. I rated it pretty highly. I rated it in A tier. And the reason I rated it in A tier in the last sideboard tier, I don't even know if it was the last one I did, but one of them, I rated it pretty highly, is because it's basically the next card I want to talk about, which is Dyna, but like tutorable in certain circumstances and proactive. That being said, it is weaker than Dyna. And Dyna kind of being reactive kind of is better. Like I'm going to say Dyna is play if you can. Like the card is very fucking strong. Actually, I'm going to put it at the top of play if you can. Whereas Jowgen, I'm going to say fine but outclassed. I think as the format has developed, Jowgen has been replaced basically almost entirely by Fossil Dyna. So let's reorder this sideboard thing right now real quick. We've got where's this Consecrated Light? There it is. All right, I'm going to move Consecrated Light down. I'm going to move Fossil Dyna up. I think Consecrated Light is a little bit better than Snowman and Puppet Plant because Puppet Plant can win the game on its own. Snowman Eater is just like a value card. I hate sideboarding value cards on occasion. I mean, I do love DD Crow and Does Tornado, don't get me wrong, but those are like very good value cards, whereas Snowman Eater is like, it's a fine value card, you know, you're popping a monster, but I don't know, it just doesn't do anything on its own, you know. I mean, I guess neither does DD Crow or Does Tornado, but yeah, Snowman Eater could be really good. It's a really good value card. Anyway, Consecrated Light is an auto win card, so I'm gonna rate it a little bit higher just because it's an auto win card against the most popular deck right now. So yeah, pretty much that. Dyna's insane. I think Dyna's like ridiculous versus Frogs and ridiculous versus Amaryllis, and it also just has applications versus every deck because every deck special summons. So worst case scenario, it is like kind of a Snowman Eater, and best case scenario, it instantly wins you the game because it locks your opponent out. So play if you can. I know there are a couple decks that can't. Like Frogs doesn't really love Dyna. Quick Draw doesn't really play Dyna. Those are like two of the like more popular decks that don't really play Dyna. Lightsworns doesn't really play Dyna because obviously like you can play Dyna. Like you can go JD Dyna, but like having stuff that's only good after your JDing is not ideal. But Dyna, you could play it technically in anything. But there are some decks that just have better options. I think most decks will be playing Dyna, so it's kind of disingenuous to put it in play if you can. But just think of it as like the best play if you can. And there are some decks that won't play it, but if your deck can play it, you probably should be. All right, moving on. Goes in match, and by extension, Rivalry of Warlords. I actually think these cards are good, like outright. Like, even though the Edison ruling makes them kind of shit, you know, I still think they're pretty good. And I think if you have the room, you should play them. They have applications versus Value Turbo. Well, Goes in Match is worse. Goes in Match is for sure worse. Rivalry is like play if you can. Goes in Match is like niche for like dragons or quick draw or stuff like that. Sometimes versus frogs. But I actually think that Rivalry is not bad. I think it has a lot of applications, particularly versus synchro decks. It's like decent versus Value Turbo. It's decent versus frogs. If they set up the dupe block and they have 2 aquas in play, then they can't just sack one of them for Caius. So Rivalry does a pretty good job at stalemating games. It can also pick up +1s. It's a Floodgate. That's a removal spell. Like, let's say your opponent goes Grepher Armed Wing. You flip Rivalry. You're killing a monster, which is really nice. Like, at the very least, you're getting a 1-for-1, and then the Rivalry makes it awkward for them to play. So oftentimes it converts into a +1 there, because they'll be forced to play a removal spell on it. But that being said, most decks cannot support Rivalry. The only decks that really can are like dragons, fairies to some degree, and Black Wings. I guess there are probably some other ones, like aliens or some shit, but you get my point. Heroes could probably support it, but I think it's a solid play if you can. It's definitely worse than everything on the play if you can, so I'm going to move it a little bit further away. Like, these are the top 5 play if you can right now. Rivalry's a little bit worse than those, but it has a lot of application versus the most popular decks right now. So I think that because Black Wings is kind of like on the decline, Rivalry is actually pretty solid. So definitely something worth including. Goes in Match is worse just because most decks are like mono attribute, whereas most decks are not mono type, if that makes sense, popular wise right now. All right, next card. Next card is Trap Hole. Trap Hole is a card that I think is niche for bad matchups. It's really good against the summon attack decks like Black Wings and Gladiator Beasts. I think Trap Hole is really good there. It's also pretty decent versus like the Shining Angel Fairy deck. So Trap Hole has some applications there. And I think it's just niche for bad matchups. Like, if you're getting aggroed out, Trap Hole is like supplementary to your bottomless Trap Holes. It's just like an extra bottomless Trap Hole that can really help you. It's really good going first. Going second, it's fine, but it's not ideal. It sucks that it does target, I think, if I remember correctly. And it also sucks that it destroys and doesn't banish, but it's a fine card. I think it's absolutely fine. It doesn't hit special summons. Food for thought. Not food for thought, but this is what it does, you know? So, yeah, solid card. Just if you're struggling with those decks, then I would say maybe check it out. Next card. System Down. System Down, I would put in fine, but outclassed. It's just kind of a worse Cyber Dragon into Chimera Tech. That being said, it has some applications versus the Machina decks that are popular right now, which try to mill Machina Fortress, because System Down also banishes them from the graveyard as well. So that's pretty cool, but I still think it's outclassed by Cyber Dragon overall. I'll put it higher than Jowgen, though, because I think Jowgen is definitely worse than System Down. But System Down is just so narrow, and it does this one thing. I think the biggest thing holding back System Down, for me, personally, is it costs 1,000 life points, which is a heavy cost in a format where, you know, the difference between 7,000 and 8,000 is like the difference between you topping brain control for game or you not doing that. So definitely the life point cost is a hindrance. All right, next card I want to talk about. Speaking of life point cost, we got My Body as a Shield. This card is fine. I have never had a good experience with this card personally, but I've seen games where people play it and win because of it. And because of that, I'm going to say it's niche. It's definitely not a better sideboard choice than something like Cyber Dragon, but it's definitely a better sideboard choice than something like Hanawata, for example. I'm going to bump Hanawata down to fine but outclassed. Yeah, Hanawata is a fine sideboard card. And the fact that it has like some niche, it's so close, man. It's so close. Hanawata is so close to being niche, but I think the Trapstone is just so good versus those burn decks. But anyway, My Body as a Shield is definitely better than like all of these other cards. I think it's even better than like Electric Virus and Mind Crush even. I don't think Mind Crush is that good. Where the fuck is the Mind Crush thing? There it is. All right. Cool. Reordering. Man, this is so messy, but here we are. Let's move this. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think My Body as a Shield it's fine. It's interesting that it stops deck dev if you have a weak guy in play. So it's like one of the few ways to counter deck dev. It can't be used in the damage step in Edison format for no fucking reason. But it's fine. It's one of the few ways decks can play through Herald of Orange Light, which is interesting. It's one of the few ways you can play through like certain niche situations. It's like decent versus Judgment Dragon. It's okay versus Dark Arm Dragon as well. But like those are niche situations, right? Like it's terrible versus Frogs. It maybe has some application versus Value Turbo. It's really there for like the deck dev situation and the Icarus attacks and that sort of thing. Judgment Dragon. I don't think that there's like really a big, I don't know. It's fine. It's fine. 1,500 life points is way too fucking much life points. That's a lot of life points. All right, Marionette Might. Niche, probably fine, but outclassed, I would say. The one thing about Marionette Might that's really interesting is it can steal Caius. So, like, if your opponent just has a Caius in play, you can, like, take it. That's kind of cool. So I'd probably put it, like, fine but outclassed, but it is cool. It's fine. It's a fine inclusion, but probably outclassed. Next card, Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer. Like I said, most of these decks are using their graveyard. I'm going to put it in the auto-include tier. I think the card is... Actually, no, sorry. I'm going to put it in the play if you can tier. This card takes a little bit more support than Soul Release and DD Crow. But that being said, I think it's better than most of these cards here. Let me just switch this up a bit. We got the Snowman Eater. I think it's better than Snowman Eater. I think it's for sure better than Puppet Plant, even though it gets countered pretty hard by Puppet Plant. But I do think that Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer is really good. I think it's really, really strong. And I think if you can support it and you can get those attacks in, or if you want to protect your graveyard, it's up there with Soul Release and DD Crow as like the 3 premier ways to attack the graveyard in the format. And I think it's one of the best ways to do it for certain decks. Like some decks actually would much rather have Kaiku than Soul Release. And that's totally understandable. But I think Soul Release is a lot easier to support than Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer. Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer needs an avenue for battle damage. And it also needs like a graveyard to protect. And it also needs your normal summon. So three kind of like stipulations for it. Whereas Soul Release, even though Soul Release is just a hard -1 and it's never really doing more than what it's doing, it just does it, no questions asked. That being said, Kaiku is one of the few ways to counter Soul Release and DD Crow. So I think it's really, really strong. I actually, arguably, it is stronger than Consecrated Light. Like, I think it is actually up there with the strength of deck dev in a lot of situations. So yeah, definitely a really, really good card in this matchup, or not matchup, in this format, especially in this current meta. So don't sleep on it. It shuts off your opponent from activating certain things like Dark Armed and Vayu, which obviously has applications versus that specific deck. It also stops them from activating Miracle Fusion, which is really good versus heroes. So really, really solid card. I just think it's a high tier sideboard card for me. All right, next card, King Tiger. King Tiger. I'm going to put it in fine but outclassed, borderline niche. It's pretty good versus those decks. Like, let's say your deck can't support deck dev, but you want to have a similar effect. King Tiger does that, basically. It's like solid versus Frogs if they don't play too many econs. It's solid versus like fairies and shit. It's solid versus, what's that one deck? Quick Draw. Like, it's solid in a lot of those like little monster matchups. And if you're like struggling with those and you just kind of want a shutout card, or if you just want like an extra edge in those matchups, King Tiger's fine. But I'd say, honestly, it's outclassed. Let's be real. It's outclassed. You can probably find something better to play than King Tiger. All right. Next card I want to talk about is Thunder King Ryo, which isn't in my folder here for some reason. Let me see if I can pull up that guy. Let me see if I can pull up that boy. Where's he at? Where's he at? There he is. All right, sick. All right, Thunder King Ryo. I think this is a play if you can, possible auto include, but definitely play if you can. It's bad. So this is the caveat, right? It's bad versus Vayu Turbo and Frogs, which are the two most popular decks. But it's good versus like everything else. So I don't know. I don't know, man. I guess it's not great versus Amaryllis either, but ain't nobody got those $50 Amaryllises, let's be real. It's like insane versus zombies, insane versus Dragon Turbo, really good versus heroes, solid versus Quick Draw, solid versus Lightsworn. Just a really, really solid card. I'd rate it around the same place I'd rate Snowman Eater, honestly. Or, yeah, a little bit better than Rivalry. Where's Rivalry? You'll notice a lot of the cards are going to fall into this second tier here. I think that's like, there are a lot of strong sideboard options that can't be supported by every deck. Thunder King Ryo, for me, just a really, really strong card. And worst case scenario, it's a beater. Like, that's the worst case scenario. It's a huge attack stat that runs over Hamster. Like, that's pretty fucking good. And then best case scenario, it stops their search cards. It shuts off their, their Rhoda, their E-Call, their Goblin Zombie, their Sangan, whatever. And then it also negates a Synchro, or it negates a JD or a Dad, and it trades up, which is really, really good. This card is good with layered protection. It's good with hand traps like Honest, DD Crow. It's good when you have stuff like, just back row, like other floodgates on top of it. Then you can really start to like slow your opponent down and lock them down. It's just a really phenomenal card. It makes it really difficult for your opponent to win or to play through. Strong card. And it helps in a lot of matchups. Like, maybe not the most popular matchups, which is like 30% of the field, but it helps in like another 50% of the field. So you can make an argument that it's for the popular decks, which is like half of the field or whatever, but you get the idea. But yeah, Thunder King, very, very highly rated. I've had great experiences with the card personally. Next card, pardon me, Vanity's Fiend. Vanity's Fiend is crazy. Definitely play if you can tier. Definitely play if you can as well. Also stronger than Rivalry. Rivalry is like, it's play if you can, but it's like the bottom of play if you can. I think Rivalry or Vanities is better than a lot of these cards. It's better than what is this? Puppet Plant. Let me move the Puppet Plant down a bit. There we go. Snowman Eater, where's that guy? Where's that motherfucking guy at? There he is. Okay, moving him down. And then we got the Thunder King. Okay, cool. Yes, I think Vanity's Fiend is up here with these top 5 in play if you can. That being said, it's a tribute monster, and it shuts yourself off from special summoning, so not every deck can support it. But the decks that can support it should play it. It's fantastic. If you got Instant Fusion, Treeborn, extra tokens lying around that you want to sack for Vanity's Fiend, play this motherfucker. He's insane. It's like a 1 Tribute Christia. It's a lot harder to attack over than Dinah, and it ends the game really fast. 2400 is a huge stat. Like, usually 3 attacks, they're done. That's it. It's over. It's Jover, if you will. All right, next sideboard card, Trap Eater. I think this is get the fuck out tier. I think this card is garbage. I don't think it has, even in the world where you're not playing Dust Tornado and Trap Stun, you have the next card on this list, which is Twister, which I would say is fine but outclassed. Maybe borderline niche for bad matchups, but yeah, no. I think this card is just trash. But yeah, Twister, same thing, just worse Dust Tornado 99% of the time. Obviously, being a spell is good if you're siding the next card on this list, which is Royal Decree, but you still want extra outs, something like Light Mirror, then you could maybe make an argument for Twister over Dust Tornado. But if you have Decree up, then what do you need the Twister for the Light Mirror for? You know what I mean? So it's just like kind of pointless. You would just side Dust Tornado instead. Anyway, Royal Decree is fucking insane, by the way. I think it is almost auto-include. I think any deck can side Royal Decree except Frogs. Like, literally any deck except Frogs can side Royal Decree. And I think it is good in every deck but Frogs. And I've even seen frog decks cite it, which is crazy. But that's a story for a different time, right? I think it's auto-include with the caveat, except frogs. So, but yes, auto-include. This card's same thing as Trapstone. It's fucking insane. It's definitely better in some decks like Fairies, Lightsworn, than it is in stuff like Blackwings. But I know J4 was like topping with Blackwings with Royal Decree in it, just to beat the mirror, which is fucking crazy. And it's insane versus Value Turbo. It actually has application because those frog decks are playing a large number of trap cards. And so it's just a really good card. It even has application against Dragon Turbo because it shuts off their Reckless Greed. So it just has applications that even Heavy Storm doesn't have. Very, very powerful card. It goes anywhere from shutting off a third of your opponent's deck to, just like trading +1 with like any trap card, which is really good. The issue is it shuts off your own trap cards, so I'm gonna, I still think it's auto-include. Very, very strong. Very, very strong. I think it's stronger than anything in the play if you can tier, honestly. This is going to be my hot take. I always have to include one of those, right? But my hot take is that Decree is auto-include, caveat, except in frogs. Don't play it in frogs. All right. Nobleman of Extermination. This is going to go into Fine but Outclassed. Once again, I think Dust Tornado just kind of does it better. It's okay, though. You could put it in niche for bad matchups, but I think Dust Tornado just does it better. Grand Mole, my son, auto-include. It's insane versus Value Turbo. It's like the single best card versus Value Turbo. I think you have to play this card for Value Turbo. If you're losing to Value Turbo and you want a one-card auto-win button, it's this little guy right here. You get this guy going, they can never play. They'll go set Raikou. You go, okay, Grand Mole bounce. They'll go Greffer, pitch, summon Armwing. You're like, all right, Grand Mole bounce your Armwing. +1. It's insane when you have Gore's Trag Fader. It's insane when you have any sort of trap cards. It's just literally the best card versus Value Turbo. By far. And if you're playing the Value Turbo Mirror, let's say they deprison it, you return it, you get it back, you bounce it. Oh my god, it just wins the mirror match. It's like, it's such a fucking house of a card. Absolutely insane. Auto-include. Not even close. It's more an auto-include than this Royal Decree here. I'm going to bump Royal Decree down. Alright, fuck it. Fine. I will bump the Royal Decree down. But Grand Mole is auto-include. Royal Decree is stronger than anything here, though. It is stronger than. Royal Decree is play if you can. Borderline. Auto-include. There we go. We're going to move these guys around a bit. Where's the Dyna, dude? Oh my gosh. Cursed tier list. Everybody. I know how much you enjoy these cursed tier list videos. You watch them more than anything else. Yeah, I see you. Where's the fucking Dyna, man? Do I not have Dyna here? Oh, here it is. All right, cool. Yes, there we are. Decree, top of play if you can. Easily top of play if you can. Really just the best card that you can side right now. Or main, if you can, honestly. All right, moving on. 7 Tools of the Bandit. Outclassed. I hate life point costs. I personally hate them. 1,000 life points is too much. I think Trapstone just does this card's effect, but better. There's very rarely an instance you want 7 tools, and it's only if you're playing Bountiful Artemis. That's pretty much it. Alright, next up, we got Light Imprisoning Mirror. Where is this bitch? It's in here somewhere. I'm going to put niche for bad matchup. It's really only for Lightsworn and Fairies, but it is really good versus Lightsworn and Fairies. So I'm going to put it pretty high. I'm going to put it like above My Body as a Shield, actually. Where's this Mind Crush? There we are. Alright, My Body's a Shield. Get the fuck out. I actually hate life point cost. You know what? Fuck that. My Body's a Shield getting demoted. There we are. Alright, Light Mirror. Yeah, Light Mirror, it's niche, but it's for bad matchups only. Usually if you're playing like Value Turbo or Blackwings. Value Turbo has a tougher time siding it because they play Raikou, but usually it's just worth it to shut off your opponent's entire deck. I think Lightsworn and Fairies kind of destroy the dark decks. So they kind of have to have something, whether it's Deck Dev or Light Mirror. You got to have one of those cards from the dark decks side. Legendary Jiu-Jitsu Master. I think this card is actually outclassed. I think it's outclassed by Snowman Eater by a wide margin. 1800 defense and 1900 defense are two different stories because of Elemental Hero Neros Alias specifically and you're going to be siding Jujutsu Master versus that deck. Now, Jujutsu Master has attack, but like being Earth is unironically worse than being Water, and having 1300 attack is unironically worse than having 0 attack because Snowman Eater is a debris target. So, yeah, the stats are worse by every metric. His typing is worse, and he's outclassed. The only time you'd play Legendary Jujutsu Master over Snowman is if you're playing Dark Calling. So, there's that. But even then, you'd rather just have like Dynas or some shit. So, yeah, not the best pick. All right, next card. Nobleman of Crossout. I don't know, man. This one's tough for me. I've had really mixed results with it in Edison format. I don't think you should auto-include this card. I don't think you should play this card, honestly, at all. I'm not a fan of Nobleman of Crossout. I'm going to put niche for bad matchups because it does do something that nothing else really does. It does have a unique effect in that it's like, oh, you have a Raikou? I'm going to clear all those Raikous. But I don't think it's a play if you can. I think it's a worse sideboard card than everything in the play if you can tier. I think that it has less applications. Being able to hit Raikou is nice, right? But what if your opponent just doesn't draw Raikou and they go Greffer, Pitch, Vayu? Like, that's so bad. It's so bad. It's just like instantly a dead card. Whereas if you have a card like Dust Tornado, for example, it's like if they draw Raikou, it's good. And if they don't draw Raikou, it's still good. Knock is a card you're siding for 3 cards in your opponent's deck, and that is not good. That is just not a good card. So it's good versus decks that set a ton, like Dandelion decks maybe, where they've got like hamsters, dandelions, all that shit. They even set Debris Dragon. Like they're playing really defensive, but it is niche. I think it is worse than. It's probably better. Let me reorder this shit. Let's reorder this shit real quick. I think Trap Hole and I think Electric Virus is the worst in niche for bad matchups. I think Knock is worse than Mind Crush, arguably, but it does have some applications. I hate this card though. Personally, my experience with Knock has been it's a high variance card, and I hate playing high variance cards. If I wanted to play coin flips, I'd go to the casino. I live in Vegas. I don't need to fucking. Yeah, you get the idea. All right, moving on. Chain Disappearance. This is an interesting card. I think it's actually solid. You know, it's like niche for bad matchups. I'd put it somewhere around the whole like Trap Hole thing, where like, you know, it's kind of the same as that. It's interesting. It can really fuck Frog decks pretty hard. It can fuck Debris Dragon decks pretty hard. It like has applications in a lot of matchups where you wouldn't expect it to have applications, like Dragon Turbo. It's pretty good there. You just hit their Debris Dragon and then they're like, oh fuck, you stopped my normal summon basically, and they usually need that body. So I don't know, it's fine. I wouldn't side it, but maybe it's the 15th card, you can't decide what to side. Then I've done that before, I guess, because I didn't have another sideboard card with me and I was like, I guess I'll just throw this in there. It's fine. It's fine. It's niche. It has some applications. I don't think it's the blowout card by any means in too many matchups. Like it's fine versus Frogs, which is the second most popular deck. But it's not ideal. Next card, Possessed Dark Soul. This is an interesting card. It tributes itself, for those of you who don't know what it does, it tributes itself to take all level 3 or lower monsters your opponent controls. The fun application with this card is you tribute it to steal your opponent's Duplock, which is pretty cool, but I think I'm going to put it in Get the Fuck Out tier because if you steal your opponent's Duplock, they're like, okay, bring back Treeborn, sack for Monarch, destroy one dupe, attack over the other, add back Swap Frog, and they still win the exchange. So even in the really, really sick scenarios, Possessed Dark Soul is not very good. So I'm going to put it in Get the Fuck Out tier. This card has more applications in later metas, like, I want to say, Tengu Plant format. Possessed Dark Soul has a lot more applications because it's a tour guide target, it's a level 3 Dark Fiend, and you can steal like Shine Balls and shit. Like there's more like impactful things you can do when stealing a low level monster in the later formats. But in Edison format, the best thing you can do is steal a Duplock, and that's not very good. So GTFO tier with that guy. All right, where were we? What have we not covered yet? What have we not covered? What hath we not covered? Armed Sea Hunter. This is a card that recently made its first appearance in an RBET top 8. And I think this is a niche for bad matchups card, but it's pretty good. If you can summon water monsters, it has a good effect. It just is a revived king. So that's pretty good, I think. I'm pretty sure that's what it does. I'm not going to Google it because it's not good enough for me to care. All right, next card, Zombie World. This card is great. This card is actually really, really good for a couple of reasons. I'm going to put it under Rivalry. But actually, no. I'm going to put it over Rivalry. I think it's slightly better than... I'll put it under Rivalry. It's really good versus Frogs, second most popular deck. And it's also really good versus Amaryllis, which is a deck that is picking up a lot of popularity. This completely shuts that deck down. It's also really good versus Dragons. It's good versus Dragon Turbo specifically, because then they can't summon Red Eyes because all their monsters in play are zombies, and they can't banish anything to special a Red Eyes. So it just completely stops them. That being said, they do have lines to clear it with like Bryonic and stuff, but you force them to go those lines. And when you have the Zombie World in play, it's like, okay, I force you to do these things. That, and it shuts off Monarchs, which is like pretty sweet. So I think it's a play if you can card. Obviously, it's two-sided. You know, it hits both players. But it shuts off a lot of matchups in weird ways. Like, against Blackwings, you play it, and then they can't Icarus attack you unless they set a monster. So that's pretty cool. It can shut off Icarus attack, sort of. It can shut off a lot of, like, interesting situations that you wouldn't think would shut off. But, yeah, very solid card. I think it's a play if you can style card. Let me go ahead and reorder some of these. Not reorder, but just move them down so there's more space. Because, yeah, I think Zombie World is pretty good. I think it's up there for me. I think we're going to need a little bit more space at the top of play if you can here in a second. Because there's a card that I'm gonna put there that's really, really strong. Okay, moving on. All right, next card, Forbidden Chalice. Forbidden Chalice is solid. I think it's better than Knock, for sure. Like, I think it's niche for bad matchups, but in this metagame, it's not bad. It's definitely better than Knock right now. Because, like, if you're only siding Knock for Raikou, then Forbidden Chalice kind of just does that same thing, basically, in a way. Lets you attack through Raikou, which is nice. Jellin Duo. This card recently saw its first, I believe, top 8 appearance in the last RBET in the sideboard of Masha's second place Christia Lightsworn deck. I think this card is trash. I think it's fucking garbage. I don't know why you would ever play this card. I don't know. I feel like there are just so many better cards. I could be wrong. I could be like just totally off the mark on this card. But I feel like, you know, citing Marshmallow is a meme. Like, what are you citing this for? Like, what is going to have trouble dealing with a defense position wall? Like, every deck can get through a defense position wall fairly easily. Every good deck, at least. I just don't understand what you're citing this for. Like, are you citing it with hopes of, like, setting it and then hoping to tribute summon a Christia successfully? Like, that is terrible. I don't know how to say it. I'm going to put it and get the fuck out here. It got second place at the biggest tournament this year so far, and I'm still going to put it and get the fuck out here because I just don't see it. Like, even in the, like, games I've watched, I've never seen a time where it's like, wow, I'm so glad that they had Jellin Duo, or that, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, there's never a situation where it's like, damn, I wish I had Jellin Duo. It's like, no, it's like, at least even for Trap Eater and Possessed Dark Soul, there are situations where you could make an argument. But for Jellin Duo, it's like, I don't know. It's like a fucking Thousand Eyes idol. Like, that's how I see it. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, I'm not a Jellin Duo believer. Although a lot of people are. I don't know. I don't get it. Maybe that's just me. But moving on. Pulling the rug. Now you guys can see why I was reordering things. Pulling the Rug is a play if you can card. It's very strong. I think it's up there for me personally. You know, it's up there. It's I don't know if it's as strong as Royal Decree or Deck Dev or Dyna or Vanities or any of these other cards. But It's up there for me. It's up there. I think some decks obviously can't play it. Like, either you have, the only deck that can't play it is Frogs, really. And even Frogs can make an argument to play it. But Pulling the Rug is a really interesting card because it warps the meta in a certain way. It says, like, Monarch decks can't also play Breaker. You know what I mean? It says you can't have too many summon, enter the battlefield search effects, or enter the battlefield pop effects. And it balances out a lot of the, like, power of those cards in Edison format. Because if it wasn't for, like, if it wasn't for Pulling the Rug, like, if Pulling the Rug didn't exist, then the format would be dominated by, like, Machina Gear Frame Caius style effects. Like Stratos Caius, that sort of like just summon, get a value card, get value immediately out of the card. It would be dominated by those. But because of Pulling the Rug, the format is a lot more like, you got to be a little bit more careful. You know what I mean? You can't just be like slamming Caiuses in post-board games. So I think that the card, it's format warping. So that's how good it is, obviously. You know what I mean? But, yeah, I think, I don't know how good it is compared to like Royal Decree or Dyna or Deck Dive. It's like not as auto-win as some of these cards, but it's probably better than Kaiku Consecrated, and I don't know, man. I don't know if it's better. But it's in this top tier. It's in like this top tier of like play if you can cards, right? It's definitely better than like these 5 cards here. It's definitely better than Zombie World, Rivalry, Thunder King, Snowman, and Puppet Plant. It's definitely better than these cards because these cards are a little bit more narrow, whereas Pulling the Rug has applications versus anything playing Caius, which is fucking anything in the format. It just hits a really, really wide range of decks, and it hits the 2 most popular decks like pretty well. Against Value Turbo, it hits Armageddon Knight and Caius, and against Frogs, it hits everything that fucking normal summon, Stratos, Caius, Ryza, all that shit, Swap Frog even. I've hit before with a Pulling the Rug, so yeah, no, it's definitely a tier above, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's auto-include. I don't think it's as auto-include as the top 6 cards up here, and you can't play it in Frogs. And that's kind of my big, like, if you can't play it in Frogs, then it by default cannot be an auto-include. Like, if it's something you cannot main deck and make an argument to main deck in every single deck in the format, then it can't make it into the auto-include tier. All right, moving on. Lightning Vortex. Lightning Vortex is in my auto-include tier. You can make an argument to play one of these in every single deck in the format. It's just fucking great. It's just a Regeki style effect. Punish the opponent for overcommitting. Deals with Titanial. Deals with Duplock. Deals with big boards, like maybe you drop Gores and you survive and you just need to blow up their board. Lightning Vortex is a catch-all. Sets up your graveyard. Pitch cards you need to set up. It's a spell card, so it's fast. You can even use it as just a -1 spot removal to clear something annoying like an Absolute Zero or a Machina Fortress. It has applications versus every deck, and it's an amazing card. I think it's an auto-include tier for me. I think it's very, very strong, and the most recent results in tournaments have kind of proved this. Lightning Vortex has been in almost every single sideboard of successful decks recently. So, yeah, very, very strong card. Definitely in my auto-include tier. Next card, Mask of Restrict. This is kind of the definition of, like, niche but for bad matchups. But it is really good in those bad matchups. Like, it auto wins. So I'm gonna put it right next to the Light Imprisoning Mirror, because that's where that boy goes. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just where that boy goes. All right, yeah. Mask of Restrict auto wins versus Frogs. Doesn't do anything versus anything else. I guess it's fine versus Quick Draw because it stops Lone Fire and it stops Caius, I guess. But it's an auto win versus Frogs. You can make an argument to side this against Blackwings. Flip it turn 1, they can't Icarus or Deck Dev you. That's kind of funny, but realistically, it's not ideal. It's not great. You're maybe shutting off 5 cards at most, which is still, it's still something, right? It's still like 1 card to shut off 5 cards. It's a decree for very specific cards. Yeah, there's possibly something there, but it's niche for bad matchups, and the bad matchup is Frogs. If you're struggling with Frogs, side Mask of Restrict, it's the single best card versus Frogs. By far, next to like Soul Release and shit. Moving on, Starlight Road. Starlight Road has a lot of applications. I think it's the best version of My Body as a Shield. I'm gonna put it in play if you can, but I'm gonna put it pretty low because Blackwings are on the decline, and that's usually what you're siding it for is Blackwings. So yeah, I'm gonna put it low. It loses to Royal Oppression too, which obviously is not ideal, and it's like not good versus Frogs or Value Turbo, which are the 2 most popular decks. So I'm going to put it on play if you can, but like it's like a 15th sideboard slot. It's basically my body as a shield, but good, I would say. That's how I would describe Starlight Road. If it ever resolves, you're winning the game. So that's like pretty cool. Definitely a nice little salt sprinkle. What is it? Icing on top is that it's an auto win card, but yeah, it's really there for Blackwings, for that Icarus attack, for that deck dev, for that Torrential Tribute, Mirror Force, Heavy Storm, you know, for that sort of stuff. If you need to protect floodgates, side of Starlight Road, side 1 and 2 to help defend against that sort of stuff. All right, next card. We're getting towards the end here. Oh, this card's very important. Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. This is the card that I've had in my mind since making this video. It's an insane sideboard card right now. I think it's like probably the best thing you can play against Vayu Turbo. Like the best single card. If you have 5 main deck cards and you get 1 sideboard card versus Vayu Turbo, the best one you can get is Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. That's it. Hands down. It is the best sideboard card against the most popular deck right now. So if you're watching this tier list in April 2024 and you want to beat Vayu Turbo, this is the card. If your deck can support it, this is the card. It shuts off Caius. It shuts off Greffer. It shuts off Armageddon. Shuts off Plague. Shuts off Necrogarna. Dark Armed. It shuts off their whole deck but Raikou. That's it. It shuts off the whole deck but Raikou. You beat everything. They cannot deal with this card. If they don't have Dust Tornado or Raikou to out it, it beats their entire deck. They can still attack you. You got to keep that in mind, but who fucking cares? You know what I mean? Like, any deck can attack under a skill drain, right? So if you have one very, very heavily impactful card versus Vayu Turbo, this is the one that you want to pick. This or Consecrated Light, I would say. Anyway, that being said, though, Shadow Imprisoning Mirror can be played in a wider variety of decks. What's funny is if you're playing Blackwings, you can actually side Shadow Imprisoning Mirror against Vayu. Like, that is the difference, is that Shadow Imprisoning Mirror can go in more decks, whereas Consecrated Light, you can't side that playing Blackwings. So that's kind of my my approach to that card. Anyway, moving on. A very, very good card. Very, very, very good card. Few more cards here to touch on. I'm skipping over some of the cards that I think are kind of mid that just really have no application, like Messenger of Peace. Like, there's so few decks that are going to side that card. I think there's a lot of cards you could technically quote unquote sideboard in Edison format, like Chinzo or whatever, that are just like more niche versions of the cards we've talked about in the top tier here. But let me pull up a card that I think is interesting, at least a card that I think has applications, and that's Dark Bribe. And the reason I'm bringing up this card is because if you'll notice, look, let's look at the top tier. I'm gonna set this down here for a second. If you notice the top, like, however many, like 16 or so of these cards, we've got, you know, Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, we've got Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer, Vanity's Fiend, we've got Zombie World, we've got Mask of Restrict, we've got Light Mirror, you know what I mean? We've got a lot of cards that instantly win the game. Dyna, instantly win the game if they stick around. And so, one of the things you can do to supplement those instant win cards is side in kind of a shitty Omni Negate to defend them. I think that there is application for Dark Bribe. I think that it is niche for bad matchups, or niche in a sense that you're going to be siding it alongside heavy counts of Floodgates. So for example, if my deck is like, I get fucked by frogs, right? I get absolutely destroyed by frogs. I'm going to side triple Mask, triple Rivalry, right? But you need something like an extra way to defend against Heavy Storm and Space Typhoon and Dust Tornado and that shit. Just slap a Dark Bribe in there. And then Dark Bribe can also counter like any sort of like random shit that comes up, like Lightning Vortex or Icarus Attack or something like that, you know? And Dark Bribe is also an interesting card to side because a lot of people side in these powerful -1 cards like Deck Devastation Virus, Lightning Vortex, that sort of stuff. And Dark Bribe can at least trade 2 for 2 with those. Giving your opponent a draw is the worst thing you can ever do in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think Dark Bribe is a very bad card outside of specifically those situations where you need to defend an auto-win card. But if you need to defend that auto-win card, that's pretty much that. I think that's just something that it fills a role. It fills a role basically. Yeah, pretty much. That should be about it. let me see here. What are we missing? In the last tier list video, I ranked some other cards. Oh no. Let's do another one. Let's do one last one. I was gonna say Book of Moon. Book of Moon is an auto include card for me in the sideboards. It shuts off Vanity's Fiends. It shuts off stupid shit like Consecrated Light. It shuts off Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer. It stops shit like Grand Mole. It stops shit like Thunder King. It helps you play through back row. It helps you resolve your plays. Like if you special your own Cyber Dragon and they have like a bottomless, you can book it. You know what I mean? Just stuff like that. If you attack, they have Deep Prison, you can book your monster to keep it around. Just a really strong card, especially in post-board games when your opponent has all these bullshit Floodgate monsters you need to flip face down. Or they have Royal Decree and Trap Stun to shut off your trap cards. You just need spell-based interaction. So I'm going to put it in the auto-include tier. And it's kind of going to segue me into my last point. In the last tier list, I included a lot of cards that are main decked in a lot of situations, like Royal Oppression, for example. And I'm going to not include those this time around, because I think that if a deck can support cards like Royal Oppression, then they're either main decking it already, or they're only siding it because it hurts other decks more than it hurts their own. And I'm just not going to get into like siding Bottomless Trap Hole and all that shit as of right now. I think that these are cards that you'll expect to see in sideboards, cards that improve matchups. They're not like functional swap outs in different circumstances. Like people do side Deep Prison, yes, right? But that's just because they need a card to switch out with their main deck card. It doesn't necessarily mean that Deep Prison is a card that they're siding for a specific matchup, or it's not like technically a specifically designated sideboard card. Like this list is, these are like specifically cards that have been in sideboards that are specifically for sideboards and less in main boards. Like the auto include tier is the closest thing you could get to like making an argument to main deck these cards. And then everything that's above that, like Deep Prison, Bottomless, Royal Oppression, that you commonly see in main decks, I'm just not gonna bother talking about. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in. A lot of exciting stuff coming up. The RBET this weekend is going to be very hype. I'm excited to see if this tier list holds up with what people are going to be doing this weekend. And in the future Edison format meta. I know it's going to change. I know it won't always be what it is right now forever, because that has never been the case. This format is too neutral power level. It's too neutral. Like every deck is too similar. I was trying to put together like a deck tier list, and I'm just like, dude, I want to put every deck in A tier, because there's no functional power difference between like Lightsworn and Vayu Turbo and Quick Draw. It's like all these decks are just the same, like in a lot of ways, and they play, they have strengths and they have weaknesses, and nothing is making one of them like significantly better than the other. So yeah, I think that this is a more helpful thing to give like a sideboarding tier list that can apply to any given meta. But I don't know, maybe I'll do a tier list. Who knows? Smash like. See you guys in the next one. Peace.